Good morning, ISACA members and guests. I hope you are doing well this morning and that you are still staying at home and staying safe. If you're like me, you're probably missing the interactions with people and building bonds and connections through face-to-face communication. But I hope the online communication and engagement is going well and that you're coping in this new normal. I know that we don't all face the same personal circumstances, and while we're facing the storm together, we might not all be in the same boat. So please reach out to your fellow members. Please check up on them, make sure they're okay, and also use this time to be kind to each other and to go the extra mile in terms of helping someone in need. I know that we are strong and resilient people. We are putting our faith in the leadership of our country, and we are hoping and praying and holding on to our faith that things will get better. So today I want to introduce Kenneth Palliam, who will speak to you about IT auditing. Kenneth is a senior IT audit manager with more than 18 years experience. He has worked predominantly in consultancy services and financial services, focusing on IT advisory, IT assurance, risk, and governance services. He has also completed his financial audit articles, and he has extensive experience in ERP, operational and reporting systems. He is currently the Vice President of the ISACA South Africa chapter, and he has served previously as the Academic Relations Director and Membership and Education Director on the ISACA SA board. He is a CISA. He is certified in risk and information systems controls, and he holds a Seagate certification. He is also a member of the Institute for Robotic Process Automation and Artificial Intelligence, and he is a member of the ACFE South Africa. So join me in giving Kenneth a warm online applause for his insights on IT auditing. Kenneth, over to you.
Is to provide you with an appreciation So I hope you guys can hear me now. Firstly, thank you, Arlene, for that introduction. As mentioned, in addition to being the Vice President of ISACA South Africa, I'm also a Senior IT Audit Manager at BDO Advisory Pty Limited in their Johannesburg office. So just a disclaimer and an acknowledgement regarding the presentation. But in the interest of time, I'd like to just start with the aim of today's presentation. So the aim of today's presentation is to provide you with an appreciation of what an IT audit is, the different types of IT audits, who would conduct these reviews, and the skills and expertise needed. I'll also touch on some risks and benefits, and time permitting, a little bit on the future of IT auditing. I usually do this presentation for university students, and the focus is more in terms of career path and the certifications. However, for today's presentation, I want to focus more on in terms of external audit and internal audit. So whilst I've provided the definition for an IT audit, it must be noted that the concept of IT auditing was formed in the mid-1960s with the introduction of computers. Since then, IT auditing has gone through numerous changes, largely due to advances in technology and the incorporation of technology into business. IT auditing needs to keep pace and evolve as new technologies are developed. As digitalization, process automation, artificial intelligence, and machine learning become more prolific, more and more companies become increasingly dependent on IT. It's no longer just banks and telecommunication companies that require IT to maintain business operations. One of the most important roles of the IT audit is to audit over critical systems in order to support financial audit, internal audit, or any other regulatory or form of attestation engagement. The purpose of an external audit or financial statement audit is to provide assurance that the financial statements present fairly in all material respects. An entity's financial position, their results of their operations, and the cash flow in conformity with accounting practices. The purpose of an IT audit is to evaluate the system's internal control, design, and effectiveness. This includes, but is not limited to, the efficiency and security protocols. Also included are the development processes, IT governance, or oversight. Installing controls are necessary, but not sufficient to provide adequate security. People responsible for security must consider if the controls are installed as intended, if they have been effective over the period of review, or if any breach in security has occurred, and if so, what actions can be done to prevent future breaches. For example, within a SAP environment, there are built-in controls, for example, the three-way matching between purchase orders, goods received notes, and invoices. If this control was switched off, there would be a risk of unrecorded liabilities, and this would have an impact on the financial statements. A question I often get is, why does IT have to test backups and restoration testing, or even physical access to the server room for a financial audit? And the answer to this question is that one should consider for a moment, if the technology infrastructure is compromised, in other words, financial information is no longer available, and you need to restore your IT systems, are you able to do so, and how quickly? Do you agree that in such a scenario, this would impact your financial statements? If systems are not available, you may not be able to transact or conduct business, which would impact on the financial assertion of a going concern. The IT audit aims to evaluate the following. Firstly, will the organization's computer systems be available for business at all times when required? Will the information in the systems be disclosed only to authorized users? Will the information provided by the system always be accurate, reliable, and timely? In this way, the audit hopes to assess the risk of the company's valuable assets, being its information, and establish methods of minimizing those risks. Typically, with an application control review, the focus is more on your inputs, your outputs, and your processing of the system. And then data analytics is essentially the analysis of data. But one should always bear in mind that when it comes to data analytics, your data analytics is only as good as the information that has been captured into the system. So when it comes to internal auditing, whilst external audits focus on financial information, internal audits focus on controls. This is a very simplistic differentiation. In reality, there is a degree of overlap, and hence you would find or would have heard of a term called combined assurance, which is different assurance providers collaborating to reduce audit fatigue. This list of IT audits is by no means exhaustive and can be done as part of either an external audit or an internal audit or even an independent review. As you can see from the list of different types of audits, there is a lot of things that one could potentially test within an information technology environment. So who should be conducting an IT audit? And the obvious answer to this question would be the IT auditor, or more specifically, the Certified Information Systems Auditor. Considering that information technology has become increasingly embedded into businesses and financial processes, the modern-day auditor needs to be multi-skilled with the ability to think on their feet, rationalize, and apply logic. Audit should no longer be viewed as a checklist exercise. So, in addition to CISA, there are many other certifications. And within ISACA, you would have the different certifications which specialize in different areas. This slide focuses on security certifications for the different security areas. Next, I would just like to talk about very briefly about the standard IT audit process, which comprises of planning, execution, and reporting. Now, remember that list of all those different types of audits. Essentially, each of those audits would follow the same process in terms of planning adequately for that assignment, executing by exercising or testing whatever is necessary for that particular audit, and then ultimately reporting on your findings. There are also 5 types of testing methods which the auditor would typically use. And that would be inquiry, observation, examination or inspection of evidence, reperformance, and CATS. CATS usually helps provide a better understanding of the information that's available. When it comes to audit programs, there are a number of generic audit programs for some of the specialized audits which are available to ISACA members, and these can be tailored and adapted for your specific assignment. When it comes to IT audit risks, firstly, new technology that both complements and augments human skills have the power to exponentially increase speed, scalability, quality, precision, and operating efficiency across organizations. When embarking on such an important digital transformation project, companies must remain cognizant of the risks and the governance responsibilities associated with automation and applications. Secondly, when it comes to cybersecurity, several factors have driven the increased attention paid to cybersecurity issues, including changes in the threat landscape, rapid changes in technology, changing regulatory environments, social change, and corporate change. A security breach can be disastrous to the company's bottom line and reputation. This brings us to compliance and regulatory. And currently, data privacy is receiving a lot of attention in this space. Globally, there is an increased focus on regulations pertaining to fraud, cyber, and data security operations. Product liability, competition, consumer protection, price controls, and the list is endless. Whilst law and regulations are being developed and updated, compliance is expensive and it requires strong internal business controls. And it requires experienced legal departments to help better understand these legal requirements. The next risk that I want to speak about briefly is third parties. So companies are increasingly relying on third parties to carry out vital business functions, resulting in broadly distributed business models. However, these expanding distributed enterprises open up companies to numerous new risks and potential compliance failures that can lead to fines, lawsuits, operational bans, and reputational damage. An example of a third-party relationship would be a medical scheme, for example, where the medical scheme would outsource the processing of their claims to a third party. And lastly, in terms of IT audit risk, workforce changes. As more and more robots or other cognitive technologies work side by side with a human labor force, leaders are increasingly challenged to integrate and make the most of both kinds of labor. The challenge is significant. So next, I want to speak about a couple of benefits resulting from IT audits. IT auditors frequently find themselves educating the business community on how their work adds value to an organization. Internal audit departments commonly have an IT audit component which is deployed with a clear perspective on its role in an organization. However, in our experience as IT auditors, the wider business community needs to understand the IT audit function in order to realize the maximum benefit. To be specific, IT audits may cover a wide range of IT processing and communication infrastructure, such as your client server systems and networks, operating systems, security systems, software applications, web services, databases, change management procedures, and disaster recovery planning. The sequence of a standard audit starts with identifying risks, then assessing the design of controls, and finally testing the effectiveness of the controls. And a skillful IT auditor can add value in each phase of the audit. Companies generally maintain an IT audit function to provide assurance on technology controls and to ensure regulatory compliance with state or industry-specific requirements. As investments in technology grow, IT auditing can provide assurance that risks are controlled and that huge losses are not likely. An organization may also determine that a high risk of outage, security threat, or vulnerability exists. So, in terms of the 5 benefits of an IT audit, risk reduction. So the planning and execution of an IT audit consists of the identification and assessment of IT risks in an organization. IT audits usually cover risks related to confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information technology, infrastructure, and processes. Additional risks include effectiveness, efficiency, and reliability of IT. Once risks are assessed, there can be clear vision of what course to take to reduce or mitigate the risks through controls, to transfer the risk through insurance, or to simply accept the risk as part of the operating environment. A critical concept here is that IT risk is business risk. Any threat to or vulnerability of critical IT operations can have a direct effect on an entire organization. In short, the organization needs to know where the risks are and then proceed to do something about them. Best practice in IT risk used by auditors include ISACA's COBIT and risk IT frameworks. They also may use the IEC 27002 standard code on practice for information security. Strengthening of controls essentially is to improve the security. After assessing the risks as described above, controls can then be identified and assessed. Poorly designed or ineffective controls can be redesigned and or strengthened. An auditor can use COBIT to assess the controls in an organization and make recommendations that add value to the IT environment and to the organization as a whole. Another control framework, which is also commonly used, is the COSO model of internal controls. IT auditors can use this framework to get assurance on the effectiveness and efficiency of operations, the reliability of financial reporting, and the compliance with applicable laws and regulations. The framework contains 2 elements out of 5 that directly relate to controls, the control environment, and control activities. Compliance with regulatory requirements. Wide-ranging regulations include specific requirements for information security. The IT auditor serves as a critical function ensuring that specific requirements are met risks are assessed, and controls implemented. Various industries have additional requirements, such as the payment card industry, when it comes to data security standards in the credit card industry. In all of these compliance and regulatory areas, the IT auditor plays a central role. An organization needs assurance that all requirements are being met. Next is facilitate communication between business and technology management. I think this has been an ongoing problem for many, many years. And it is important to understand that IT auditing is a key element in management's oversight of technology. An organization's technology exists to support business strategy, functions, and operations. Alignment of business and supporting technology is critical. IT auditing maintains this alignment. And then lastly, in terms of improving IT governance. So the IT Governance Institute has published the following definition. IT governance is the responsibility of executives and board of directors and consists of the leadership, organizational structures, and processes that ensure that the enterprise's IT sustains and extends the organization's strategies and objectives. So judging from that definition, leadership, organizational structures, and processes, which are referred to in this definition, all point to IT auditors as key players. Central to IT auditing and to overall IT management is a strong understanding of the value, risks, and controls around an organization's technology environment. More specifically, IT auditors review the value, risks, and controls in each of the key components of technology, these being applications, information, infrastructure, and people. When it comes to the future of IT auditing, and I had listed it earlier in terms of the list of other IT audits, where I mentioned robotic process automation, artificial intelligence, machine learning. We find that that is kind of where the focus currently is. Also, and that is basically due to the increased use of these technologies by different organizations. In addition to the automation and robotics, we find that there has been huge strides in terms of data privacy. So with the introduction of GDPR in the European Union, our own Protection of Personal Information Act here in South Africa, and you know, new data privacy regulations in Latin America. Those are the key areas where IT is going. And, you know, because of the different areas that IT auditing supports, there will always be a need for IT auditing. You know, different technologies will come and we will need to be able to develop and keep pace with those changes and develop audit programs to audit those environments. So I want to start with my concluding remarks, and hopefully we've reached a stage where there's been a bit more understanding in terms of IT auditing. And so firstly, although an IT audit may seem like a unwelcome and complicated exercise, it is in fact a valuable and important tool for organizations. IT audits should be properly and carefully planned, and they should be undertaken by a designated IT auditor. We need to make sure that the scope of the audit is clearly planned and organized ahead of time, including allowing for sufficient time in which to undertake the audit. Make sure that all feedback and the audit report is fully understood and that any recommendations are clearly explained so that they may be easily implemented. When properly conducted, IT audits will provide your organization with detailed analysis of your current systems and practices, including identifying any areas which require further development. Most importantly of all, it will allow you to identify vulnerabilities within your system and allow you to take the necessary steps to prevent and control these. Rather than viewing IT audits as an assessment, view them as an opportunity to develop and improve your working practices. And I think that's basically all that I wanted to say in terms of the topic. You'll find that I've kind of like tried to drive the point in terms of that IT audits need to be adequately planned and executed in order for the reader to get the most out of that experience. So with that, bringing the end to my presentation, I'm welcome to take any questions that you may have at this stage. So, Andre, do we have any questions?
So we are willing to take any live questions if you do raise your hand, and then we will unmute your mic if you are willing to speak over the microphone.
Kenneth? It's
Yes.
Auditing speaking. So there's a question from Riaz. Andy, I don't know if you can unmute him. Kenneth, from my side, if you can just go back to the certifications and then and maybe talk to us about what each certification covers, just at high level, and then also you know, your recommendation in terms of the sequence, because you have quite a few of them. So just your suggestion on the sequence in which to do those certifications.
Okay, so in terms of certifications, ISACA normally talks about the core four certifications, those being CISA, C-Risk, CISM, and C-Guide. In my opinion, CISA is if one had to take one of the certifications, I would recommend doing a CISA first, because the CISA provides a general and more broader information, or in terms of the different types of areas within IT. So CISA does cover risk, it does cover security, it does cover governance. So if you're in a young IT auditor starting off in their career, or I would encourage you to do a CISA first, as that would give you a broad understanding of the IT environment. And then depending on your area of specialization, you could then either do any one of the others. There's nothing to say you should do C-Risk next or CISM. It would depend on your work area. So you have a lot of companies that employ IT risk managers, and an IT risk manager would typically do a C-Risk certification. Those working within security would do a CISM. Another security certification that's very useful is the CIS certification in the security space. And because security has been receiving a lot of attention, the CSXP, which is your practitioner level certification, which is a more technical type of certification, has been introduced by ISACA. And the CDPSE, which is your which relates to data privacy, that is, they have it hasn't been launched as yet. It's been advertised. We're still waiting to get more information in terms of that certification. But again, because data privacy, and I mentioned it in my presentation with GDPR in the European Union, for example, there is a lot more focus in terms of data privacy. And hence, ISACA saw the need to have a certification to equip individuals with the right set of skills to be actually working in that space. So I don't know, I think I've answered that question. Was there anything else that I need to elaborate on?
Kenneth, thank you. That was great. Thank you. Nice overview. I think there's quite a lot of questions in the chat.
Okay, so I have unmuted some people that have some questions in the chat. So now is your time to ask them to Kenneth. So I will also, Kenneth, if you can maybe just go to the chat, I will be taking over. So Kenneth, if you can just maybe just go to the chat and also just read some of the questions. Maybe if we can start with just one at a time. Maybe if we can start with Yaish, if you can maybe start, your hand there. If you can start with your question.
Hi. Hi, thanks, Kenneth. I'd just like to ask you a question in terms of auditing. When you audit, say, according to COBIT best practices and principles, and your company has a stance on why you're not following some of the practices, and that's in your policy, do they force you to use COBIT in the audit, or can you do they audit your policies?
So that's a good question. So what one should do in terms of auditing is you should audit an organization in accordance with their policy as a starting point. So if a company says that their policy is to do certain things, you audit against their policy. However, if you find that their policy may be inadequate, or not in line with best practice, or in this case, you use COVID as a reference point, you would then say to them or raise a finding to say, we acknowledge your policy, however, it's not in line with standard best practice. And hence, my recommendation is that you increase your password length, for example. Yeah, so always audit an organization against their policy, and where you find deficiencies in that policy, you then would make recommendations based on in terms of best practice.
Okay, thank you. And then maybe we can move to Zulfikar. Are you next?
Hi, Henry, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I just wanted some elaboration on the data analytics. So in terms of what it entails and maybe some examples of where it can be used in an audit. Thank you.
Sorry, Zulfikar, so could you just repeat that, the first part of your question?
Okay, so it's the question relates to data analytics, and you touched on it. Basically, maybe just some elaboration around what it will entail in an audit, perhaps using some examples of where it can be utilized, and yeah, and how we can go about implementing it as part of an audit. Thank you.
Yeah, so when it comes to data analytics, so firstly, in terms of the audit, we want to follow a risk-based approach, and then the data analytics needs to support whatever key areas. So, for example, revenue assurance. You would want to use data analytics in that space to give you comfort that revenue is the amount of revenue that's been recorded is complete, it's valid, it's accurate. In typical audits, well, in terms of external audit experience, you'll find that external audit will want to know about journals, for example, the completeness of journals that are being processed. So it's very important that when it comes to data analytics, you need to have that discussion with the external auditor or the auditor from a business process side to understand what their risks are and what areas they want to get comfort on. And then you can develop your data analytics to be able to support that.
Thank you, Kenneth.
Okay, and then if we take one more over the line comment, maybe we can move to. Okay, I'm just going to read one out of the chat box. Okay, so Gustav asked, in your experience, how has the lockdown affected IT audit risk, Kenneth?
Yeah, I see you're not sparing me with any of the easy questions. So when it comes to the lockdown, lots of us are continuing to work remotely. And, in my experience, we have some tools that are able to assist us. So, when it comes to getting remote access to a client's desktop, for example, there are tools available that, you would be able to access and see what's on their screen. But, I think the biggest effect is not having that human interaction with the client. It becomes very, it's not personal in the sense that when you conduct the audit. So I think that is the main thing that's missing during this time of lockdown. Because for the most part, we are able to still continue doing our work. You request information, they provide it to you through a OneDrive or a shared drive, and you can analyze that And like I said, in terms of performing walkthroughs, you can do so by remote accessing your client's desktop. But when you physically have to inspect a server room, that can be quite challenging during lockdown times. So yeah, I think those are some of the challenges that one faces working remotely.
Thank you. And then if we can take one more person just out of the online, if we can ask Rahiz Jacobs to just ask his question online to Kenneth, if you will, just to unmute him, just for a
Hi,
last
Kenneth.
online question.
Hi.
Hi, thanks for the great presentation. I think it did a good overview of the IT audit process. I just wanted to ask you to elaborate on the IT risk assessment process and how that fits into the IT audit process in terms of who performs it and necessarily who signs the results off.
So the IT risk assessment, in my experience, you usually, sometimes we do it as a separate assignment altogether, particularly in terms of an internal audit perspective. But the IT risk assessment should be done fairly early in the entire process, because the risk assessment will highlight to you the areas where you need to focus on and obtain IT audit evidence to support or mitigate those risks that have been identified. So, a IT risk assessment, in my experience, whilst working within internal audit, is done by the IT auditor. But I suppose a business process auditor could also do a risk assessment. I suppose it just depends on terms of the mix of skills within the organization that are available to do it.
Thank you, Kenneth. If we can just take one more mention out of the chat box, because this is the most questions we've ever received. We just want to say from Bella, she said, thank you so much. In your opinion, how much relevance do you think IT audit still has in the current integrated business environment where IT is well vested in business? I assume that in the current age, everyone in any organization relies and understands the use in IT and IT risk. Should we not be saying that every IT auditor is automatically an IT auditor who should learn business skills? So should we not be saying that every auditor is automatically an IT auditor who should learn business skills, Kenneth?
Yeah, so like I said in my presentation, the requirements for auditors nowadays is for them to be multi-skilled. In that sense, is you need IT auditors to understand business and finance for them to better be able to do their work. And equally so, you need business process auditors to better understand IT so that they can perform a better audit in their areas, because you'll find that business and IT are so intertwined these days, you can't really separate the two. So within the internal audit space, what we had started doing was what we call integrated audits, where you kind of put together a team of people with different skills working together to achieve the maximum benefit of that audit. But increasingly so, my opinion is that you need to have upskill auditors, be them business auditors with IT skills or IT auditors with business skills. Andre, I see there was a question from Grace on the chat, which says, in light of the certifications and memberships, is there any formal accreditation required by firms to provide articles or graduate programs for trainee IT auditors? Additionally, does ISACA have a competency framework? So to answer that question is that we do have graduate training programs at, at audit firms, and individuals that have left university after having studied, business information systems and things like that, who have now started becoming IT auditors, would enter into a graduate program or an article or traineeship program with one of the big auditing firms. And whilst there isn't a specific competency framework per se from ISACA, what we generally use is the CISA. When you apply to become a CISA, there's a list of job functions that one needs to have been competent in or rated as being competent in. And if you use that list of competencies, you can develop a competency framework for your trainee IT auditors.
Thank you so much, Kenneth, for the time and the effort you put into the slides. I'm sure everybody appreciated it. We look forward to the next webinar that is on Friday, and we will see everybody then.